Chuck,
Wow.
you're on the line with Forrest and Paul. How are you doing today?
Good evening, Forrest and Paul. Thank you for having me up on the panel and the program. Yeah,
Most definitely.
I'm a theist. I also have a degree in biology and psychology, and
Okay.
I was raised in the Catholic Church. I'm Nigerian. I was born in Nigeria. I've been raised
Mhm.
here in the States since I was 5 years old. So I'm kind of like a cafeteria Catholic. I don't have a literalist view of Christianity, but I think that, the belief in a benevolent shepherd, a divine plan, and an afterlife are very important to me. And it, gives my life meaning. And I agree with Stephen Jay Gould's idea of non-overlapping magisteria. Like you can be a scientist who also embraces religion. I don't see why you have to make real science your religion. I think they don't have to overlap. You don't have to embrace science is a tool. You don't have to use a tool to find meaning in your life. So
No,
yeah,
of course you
and
don't.
this idea,
But also, you don't like, I don't think you should make science a religion either. I think that defeats the purpose of science. But I also don't agree that science and religion are like compatible and that you can do both at the same time. I know people who do both at the same time. I know plenty of scientists with higher degrees than I have who are also
Mhm.
religious. The issue I take with
Right?
that is that you're using a different kind of thinking for that one thing than you do for literally anything ever, especially as a scientist. You are using a very different kind of thinking that you would never allow in the rest of your life or in the rest of your mind. And I find that deeply
This is true.
problematic.
Now, Forrest, though,
Well, this
when
is
people say non-overlapping magistrate, often what they mean is that science and religion just answer different questions. That there's no questions that overlap. Is that what you mean, Chuck? Is that what you meant by that?
well, I mean, like think of it as different lenses. So if you're in the laboratory, you're going to
Oh,
have
so
your
you don't
scientific
mean that.
lenses.
Okay.
It's a
Sorry.
little bit more nuanced. So when I'm in the laboratory, I'm trying to find cause and effect relationships. That requires a different type of vision, a different type of thinking. But when I'm trying to ask, questions of meaning and cosmic meaning and purpose, that is a different set of lenses. So those are two different lenses that I have on depending on the type of question that I'm asking. That makes
Okay. So you do. So to be clear, you're saying there's a certain set of questions that we answer scientifically, and there's a
right.
certain set of questions that aren't answered by science. And I think Forrest and I would agree with that.
Uh,
Science
Right.
doesn't tell.
I, I, I could vibe with that. I would take
Science
issue with
that
it, but it would
science
be
doesn't tell me what science doesn't tell me what my meaning of life is, right?
sure. I guess you could do. I would get real pedantic about it, but it
Okay.
would be derailing and
All
not the
right.
point of it.
Well,
So it's just
let's
yeah.
get to your actual
For
point, Chuck, because I don't think
yeah,
that was what you called about.
for the sake of discussion right now, I'll say fine to that.
Okay. But the point of my call is, I think for me, uh, being that I'm a cafeteria Catholic, I don't take everything literal, like a literalist view of Christianity. For God is an avatar of the tribe or the nation, and that it exists in all of our minds. The reason why I say that is because every civilization that has been studied to the beginning has had a god or gods or a spiritual realm. So there's something about God and religion that helps to, bring the tribe together in a unified way that, you know, you're able to have like group mindedness when you orient yourself to this God that, is kind of the avatar of your tribe or nation or kingdom or whatever you want to
Chuck, you
call it.
would agree though
Like,
that Chuck, you'd agree that there are some what I would still call religions that don't have a theistic or don't have a being as the head of it, right? So like, I'm
yeah, well,
here
yeah,
in Canada. Here in Canada, there's a lot of First Nations like spirituality religions, right? That don't have a being or a deity, and there's so
it could be
you'd
like
agree,
animisms where I agree with that.
yeah.
It could be
So
a god of the
okay,
earth, god of the sun.
so you're
Uh,
not saying God is an avatar. You're just saying that everyone creates a unified story
well,
within
yeah,
their
they're different
tribe.
cultural different cultural expressions of the same idea, essentially. So it really, the purpose is to unify the tribe against a vision of how the world works, or something where you can expand your group mindedness to your whole tribe or nation. And the most successful religions are the ones who are able to expand this group mindedness from 3 people to 3,000 people to 3 million people to 3 billion people. Most religions are very limited in their scope. Like the Abrahamic religions.
I just said it said this sounds like basic sociology that Forrest and I are going to nod our head and say, yes, in groups, create mythologies and create stories. I've even been in companies where like, oh, we've created this story about how our company exists. And, that's the real thing that really is binding to us. So do you have a point beyond what we would nod our heads to
Yeah,
that in groups cohere around common stories?
well, yeah, but the other part of this is that the one of the important shortcomings of atheism is the radical individualism. Like atheists, because
Agreed.
we're human beings are
Agreed.
we're because we're so profoundly social, and we're social beings because our tribes are our survival vehicle. So we don't operate like lone wolves, but we're born
Right.
into these
So
tribes, shape our
to be clear,
identities
what
before we
are you?
just
Did you call in to tell us that atheism, a weakness of atheism, is it doesn't create a nice coherent narrative? Because I'm aware of this.
Yeah, we've talked
well
about
not
that at length on the show. Yeah.
well I went through a period of atheism in university when I was studying biology. I was reading a lot of Dawkins and Hitchens and Harris. And one thing I
But
came to realize is that it's hard to create a group of atheists
it
who agree
is.
on anything.
So
It
so
sure
sorry.
So
If I
is.
Yeah, if I can just kind of steer this a little bit here. We both agree. We've talked about this at length on the show. One of the hardest things for people who are coming out of religion is that they lose that sense of community because, as you were just alluding to, it's very easy to have a good cohesive group when everybody believes the same thing. If I walk into the church down the street, I can be pretty sure that, by and large, the people in that room are all believing with the same general moral principles, the same general like
right,
values for like society. Like that's the whole
right,
point of that. And atheists are
right,
just simply not believing in a God. You have Democrat and Republican atheists. You have conservative and liberal atheists. You have very, moral and amoral atheists. Atheists are all over the place because it's just a single question about a single issue, whereas a religion is a whole set of beliefs. And so, like, yeah, that's a whole thing. Where does that get us in terms of like a God being a valuable, useful, or more importantly, this is where I'd like to get, true
true.
proposition? Yes, that's where I'd like to, because we can agree, like, yeah,
So,
people came up with
so
like stories about their origins. People came up with stories about where they came from, where the world came from.
right,
Religion, as it started, was the first crack at science. It was trying to explain what's going on around us. But because it was our first attempt at science, it was also our worst attempt at science. And so, yes, it's very cool and cohesive, but it's also, as I talked about in the last call, more or less a domestication tool for people at this point. It's gone from
yeah,
us just a kind of a vague guess at like where we came from, and now morphed into these are moral principles that you must adhere to, otherwise you're bad and evil and wicked. And for the past 2,000 years, it's been a story of torturing and murdering and genociding and raping your way across the world, forcing people to convert by threat of death or torture. That's been religion, and so it's not really a cohesive societal thing as much as it is just like this kind of like thing that just hangs
that's
over our heads like a fucking albatross.
not really. The Western civilization is built on beliefs like this. Our calendar, our holidays, the way our the wording in our constitution is shaped by these ideas. So
Yes,
it's
because the
to be
people
a
who
cult.
established it had those ideas and they killed everyone who didn't have those ideas. That's what I was saying. So like, yes, it's
So the
very interesting and socially cohesive. That doesn't mean that it's good.
right,
And more importantly, it doesn't mean that it's true. And we're curious about whether or not it's true.
right, but the okay, the name of the show is "Why Do You Believe in God?" or something to that effect. Like why?
Sure.
What is right? I can't really see the screen now, but the reason why it exists is because it helps us to to bind us together into groups so that we could survive and reproduce. But this whole thing about atheism, it failed because you can't build a civilization based on atheism. This idea that there'll be a utopian future where nobody believes in God is a non-starter because
So
it's the
let me just cut you off here, Chuck, because like I see where this is going and it sucks. Let's pretend that I agree with everything you're saying. I fucking don't, but like let's just
right,
assume, right?
right,
That religion has this great evolutionary utility and it makes
right,
societies that are cohesive and they survive and reproduce. Does that tell you
right.
anything about whether or not the religion is actually true?
Well, no, it doesn't.
Okay, so then
They
that's not what we're talking about then. I can sit here and give
right.
you evolutionary reasons for religion. It doesn't have anything to do with whether or not religion is true. And now, today, in this world, we have social cohesion and shit without the need for religion. There's plenty of secular societies out there that are cohesive and productive and functional and populating and all these things. They're doing great. We don't
But
need that anymore.
it's just
We don't need the whip and the
right,
chain and the of religion. We don't need it. So, is your God real? And if so, is he worth
right.
worshiping?
Well, it's real that it exists in our minds. Like God is an idea so mysterious that it has no real meaning within grasp of the human mind. But because
I
human
agree
beings,
that
we live
God
in
is
this.
meaningless, but like
Mm,
that's not what I'm
no,
asking. Like there's
mm,
lots of
no,
things that exist in our minds. The Easter bunny exists
right.
in lots of people's minds. Doesn't mean it's real, doesn't mean it's worth caring about. So like
But
yeah, religion
things
has
like
a major part of our history in social cohesion and in genocide
right.
especially. It's really good at those things. But
That's
now
another
today
straw man.
If you're
That's
saying that
another straw
God
man.
is real in the same sense that a 7-day work week is real or a 7-day week is real,
sure. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
like I'm saying God.
it's an arbitrary thing that we use to like keep society flowing in a civilized way, or what? I shouldn't use the word
Well,
civilized in that way. I meant the word civilized in that way to be facetious, and I need to be very more clear
mm,
about that. We keep society
I'm,
flowing in a way that the owners like. That's what religions do,
I'm,
but it's not
I'm saying
real, Chuck.
real. I'm saying God is real in the same sense that social justice is real, or human rights are real, or gender identity is real. These are all aspects of that exist only in our mind, but we can't really find in reality. You see what I'm saying?
I
These
love that
are
you found a
because
way to work in gender identity there just to keep being transphobic. I would say like the whole thing is like it's not the same at all because what you're talking about is just kind of a thing that some people thought of and now we know about as a whole and we kind of do that. But there's a lot of things that do that. Aesop's fables fucking do that. Like you can pick your favorite. There's a million
yesterday was
moral
Star
stories.
Wars Day. Yesterday
Yes,
is
Star
like
Wars is
Star Wars
a
Day
thing that
we have
exists in our
now.
minds. Yeah, it's a thing that
right.
exists in our minds, and we construct some shit around it. And like that doesn't mean that it's real or useful. It's just a thing. It's a cute little thing that humans do. And so, like,
That
if you
Yeah,
ask me, like, if I teach kids the story of the lion and with the thorn in the paw and the mouse pulls it out, and that means that you pride isn't that important, and like little guys can help and things like that. That's a story that exists in people's mind that teaches them lessons that they can then construct their society about. Doesn't mean that lions and mice are out there talking to each other and doing shit. It's just a story. And so
but
what you
you're
have
missing
here
my point.
is
You're
this
missing
Bible story. I don't think I
you're missing
am.
my
What you're talking about is that
yeah,
yeah, it has some sort of utility societally,
you have
and all we're saying is that doesn't mean that it's true. And even if it was true, that doesn't mean it's worth continuing to believe in or not believe in to care about.
are human rights real? Are human rights true? Is social justice
No.
real? Is social justice
So
so
no
they're not worth
laws,
believing?
rights. That's not what I said. And that is a straw man of what I'm saying. Rights, laws, justice, these are all constructs that we make up that don't actually
What
have an
they
objective reality. Absolutely right. You can't
what
go
they
scoop up a tablespoon of human rights. Sure.
right.
But they are worth continuing and believe and like flowing because we actually see social benefit from them, both for individuals and for civilizations as a whole. So like that's
I'm
actually
saying
worth it. We don't see that
but I'm
same
saying
benefit with religion.
well, you're in the vast minority because atheists will always be in the minority because it's like a malfunction of some kind, but that's
Not
another
really,
topic altogether.
because number one, atheists are the fastest growing group amongst like, when we talk about religion and whatnot, like the non-religious group, the fastest growing. So like, yeah, we're in a minority for now, but that's only because again, can't stress this enough. the religious community has spent the last several thousand years torturing and genociding their way across the planet. So, like, being an atheist was real hard until very recently. But now, today, in this world, we're able to be an atheist without being tortured to death. And so a lot more people are being atheists. And we also have like diversity of thought and opinion being spread around. We have proliferation of social media and communication technology, allowing people to discuss things. All of those
Right.
things that religious people fucking hate, sharing of ideas and like peaceful transfer of thoughts and like having communication, the things that slave masters and priests try to avoid for the exact same reason. That all
Do you,
is
do you
is
see?
going on. And so atheism is growing, and it's not a malfunction, it's evolution. Chuck. It's people like
Right.
coming to terms with reality and realizing that if they apply the same principles of logic and morality to their belief systems, they can't justify this God. The exact same reason
Well,
why I dropped my religious beliefs and Paul dropped his religious
right.
beliefs, and the exact same reason that I was talking about earlier why I think that is really problematic when scientists are also theists.
Well, right. As long as religious people have more children than non-religious people, you'll always be in the minority. That's one. But for two, do you see
Nope,
an atheist
not true at all.
utopia in the? Do you see on the horizon where a future where a glorious future where most people are atheists? Is that a view that you believe to, you cling
There's,
to, that
I'd,
utopia where
I'd like to,
everybody is an atheist?
So, I don't care about the utility, Chuck. I don't care. I care
it's
about
not,
whether it's
yeah.
true. If
I
you
also want to
convince
point
me that
out
it's
that
true, I'll be on board.
I also like to point
All
out
right.
that religion is not a heritable trait. So, like, no, it's not true that as
Mm.
long as religious people have more children, there will always be religion in society. What you're talking about is indoctrination, Chuck. So, yeah, people will continue to indoctrinate their children, but because of what I just mentioned, the proliferation of social media and communication technologies, there will always be better arguments and better ideas out there helping to dismantle those religious beliefs and set people free from the chains that their parents put upon them through that religious indoctrination.
And read the
Well,
book by
kind
Ken
of.
Ham. I would never recommend a Ken Ham book except one called Already Gone, which is his study of why 75% of evangelical Christians are done by the time they're 12.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing,
And
man.
those are
If
just
Right.
you
numbers
taught
for us.
religion, if you stop teaching religion to children and tried to introduce these ideas to people after their 21st birthday, there would be no more religion. It would end in that very same generation. It is only
But
because of the deliberate indoctrination and fear mongering that religion is based on and relies on that it is consistent and has spread this far. And also, again, can't stress it enough. The whole genocide thing that happened like a lot. That whole thing is very prevalent and very important for the history spreading of religion.
And also,
right.
there's
Well,
some
agree
countries
to
in
dis.
Europe that are secular that are pretty great. I don't know if you've heard of them.
That's also true. And also, I know I've been talking a lot, but I would also like to point out one thing. You mentioned like this whole like atheist utopia. The cool thing about that is that we as atheists would never treat religious people the way that religious people have historically treated atheists and also everybody else, like LGBT people, women. We just wouldn't do that. Anyway, I would ask Chuck to respond to that, but he fucking hung up because it's like it's right. It was actually
I would have
while you
bowled
were
over
saying
them.
the last thing you said. Yeah, while
Okay.
you were talking that last time, he just kind of bitched out. But try
It's
again
because you're just a
sometime, Chuck.
defective minority, Forrest. That's what it is.
Oh, that's
Exactly. And he
true.
just can't argue with it. Yeah, Chuck, I would encourage you to do two things. Number one is call back sometime, especially when I'm on. I like that. Let's talk. But before you do that, I want you to think about what you are going to talk about before you call and just ask yourself questions and be like, yo, here's this thought that I've had. Double check. Are there any examples of that not being true? Is there a reason that that isn't accurate? Go to Google and say, assume the thing that if you're saying that religious societies are better, whatever the hell you're saying, go to Google and just check if there's better societies that aren't religious. Check that alternative hypothesis. Think about what you're saying and then call. Try that sometime.